On March 28, 2026, Bill Gaither marks 9 decades of life, and the weight of that number sits differently when you understand what filled most of those years. 70 of them disappeared into gospel music, into writing songs that changed what Christian music could sound like, into gathering voices that shaped an entire generation's understanding of worship and faith. What he built stands alone in American gospel history, a catalog and legacy nobody matched before him and nobody has touched since. But when you ask this man what he would change if he could walk through it all again, the answer lands in a place most people don't expect from someone who achieved what he achieved. What comes out of his mouth shifts the way you see everything he created, and hearing it today for the first time matters because it's the one thing he says cost him more than anything else. William James Gaither arrived in Alexandria, Indiana on March 28, 1936, born into circumstances that gave no hint of what was building inside him. Wealth didn't surround him, connections didn't open doors, but religion ran through his family like bedrock and music ran even deeper. Those two forces merged in him early and never separated. At 22 years old, songs were already flowing out of him that sounded unlike anything gospel music had heard. Compositions that felt less like staged performances and more like private conversations between one human and God. The partnership with his wife Gloria produced co-writes that would define an era of American Christian music, and one of those songs traveled all the way to Memphis and into the hands of Elvis Presley himself. A schoolteacher from small-town Indiana wrote, "He touched me," and the king of rock and roll recorded it, which alone would have cemented most people's careers as complete. Gaither's path took a painful detour before it expanded into something larger. The calendar read 1970, and he and Gloria were navigating a pregnancy that arrived wrapped in uncertainty, walking through depression that Gaither has spoken about with unflinching honesty in multiple interviews across the years. Fear marked that season, real and unrelenting, and out of that darkness, Because He Lives took shape. What that song offered didn't flow from a position of strength, but from desperate need. And millions of people have sung those words in hospital corridors and at gravesides because the fear embedded in it was genuine, and they could feel it. The 5 decades that followed fill entire documentary films with footage and testimony. Gaither built the Gaither Homecoming series, starting with what was supposed to be a single reunion concert for old friends, and that one gathering became something that crossed every boundary gospel music had ever erected. Voices assembled around him that the genre will remember as long as gospel music exists. George Beverly Shea, Sandy Patty, Vestal Goodman, Mark Lowry, David Phelps, and hundreds more whose names and songs became inseparable from American worship. Grammy nominations accumulated, Dove Awards followed, and in 2026, at 90 years old, another Grammy nomination arrived for Then Came the Morning, a song about resurrection after the darkest night, recorded at an age when most artists have long since retired. The scope of what he built makes what he admits next worth your full attention. When people press this songwriter about what he would redo if given the chance, he doesn't grab for business decisions gone wrong or catalog deals he should have negotiated differently or tours that took the wrong direction. What surfaces in a candid interview published by Crosswalk in January 2025 and across multiple Gaither Homecoming recordings through the years comes down to one thing: time. Specifically the time he surrendered to the work when work wasn't the answer his family needed. Without excuse or softening the edges, he has described seasons when the schedule filled every available hour and the schedule won. The gift pushed out the giver. The producer and musician in him consumed space that the husband and man of faith needed to occupy, carrying the pressure for everyone around him, the artists depending on him, the ministry expanding under his leadership, the music reaching further, the message growing louder. All of it produced years of personal depletion that he now describes with a plainness that clearly costs him something to articulate. Music got chosen over family more times than it should have. The stage won out over the supper table more than he would choose now. During the most productive stretch of his entire career, trusting God with the outcome the way he believed God was asking him to trust simply didn't happen. That regret, stated plainly without decoration, cuts deep precisely because nothing unusual lives in it. Most people listening have executed some version of that same exchange, chosen the work over the people they love most, picked output over presence, selected busyness over the kind of rest that actually restores something essential. What Gaither wants you to hear on his 90th birthday rings clear. Slow down sooner, trust sooner, rest sooner than he did. The music he has written understands something critical, though, which is that stories don't conclude at the regret. Every lyric he has crafted, every concert he has led, every voice he has gathered around a piano at 2 a.m. carries the same current running underneath. God redeems all things. The dark season that produced. Because he lives didn't destroy him, and those years of striving and depletion didn't disqualify him from what came after. All of it became soil from which his most honest writing about grace and faith would eventually grow. And none of it, he will tell you directly, has been wasted by God's economy. Then came the morning builds around a specific and deliberate idea, and Gaither has lived long enough to understand it from the inside with the kind of certainty that doesn't come cheap. The song doesn't center on Good Friday and doesn't center on Easter Sunday morning. Saturday holds the focus, that day between crucifixion and resurrection when the disciples sat in silence believing the story had finished, when hope had been buried and the quiet felt like the final word. Gaither knows what waiting in that silence feels like, wondering if the darkness means something terrible and permanent. 90 years have taught him with the kind of certainty that only long obedience produces that the morning always comes, not as a phrase meant to comfort but as a fact that has proven itself over and over across his entire life. The regret is real, and the resurrection that followed it is real, and those two things together form what the last 70 years of his work have actually been carrying. Some things he would do differently, and he says so himself without hesitation. Slowing down, trusting more, choosing the table more often, all of it he would change. In the same breath, though, he will also tell you that God has not wasted a single moment of any of it, not the dark years, not the depleted years, not the years when choices went wrong. That gospel this Christian music songwriter has been carrying since he was 22 years old stands truer on his 90th birthday than it ever has. Bill Gaither turns 90 today. If his music has ever reached you in a real moment, if you have sung because he lives somewhere, it actually mattered or heard, then came the morning on the worst Saturday of your year. Put a heart emoji in the comments right now and let him know. Subscribe, because as long as Bill Gaither is making music, coverage of every moment will continue here. Making it to the end of this video means you are not here by accident, and that statement carries weight. Most people scroll past content within 30 seconds, decide nothing holds them, and move on to the next thing in their feed. You stayed, sat with the story of a 90-year-old songwriter from Alexandria, Indiana, who gave 70 years to gospel music and still found the honesty to say some of it he would have done differently. That reveals something about who you are and what you are actually searching for. Before you close this tab or let the next video roll, stay with us for just a moment longer, because what this channel produces is built for exactly the kind of person who just watched this entire video.